The wind that night carried a strange stillness, the kind that makes even the trees hold their breath. Eliza Warren stood at the edge of her porch, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, staring at the pair of muddy boots sitting neatly beside her door. They hadn't been there when she locked up for the night. She was certain of it. And yet, there they were, brown leather, worn and scuffed, mud still clinging wet on the soles, but no footprints leading to them. She leaned closer, lantern trembling slightly in her hand. The yellow glow flickered across the porch boards. The boots seemed almost placed with care, as if someone had set them down gently, deliberately. Her breath misted in the cold air. Eliza, she whispered to herself. Don't be ridiculous. She waited a moment longer, listening. Nothing. No owl's cry, no rustle of deer. Just the wind sweeping across the wide Kansas plains. Eliza lived alone, miles from the nearest neighbor. After her father died 2 years ago, she had kept the small farmhouse running, the garden, the chickens, the silence. Silence had become her companion, her comfort, until tonight. She carried the boots inside, uncertain why. They were heavy, damp, and oddly familiar, the kind of boots her father used to wear. She set them by the hearth to dry, meaning to ask around town tomorrow. But when she returned in the morning, they were gone. For the next 3 nights, the same thing happened. Always at midnight, always the same boots, and always, no footprints. The 4th night, Eliza stayed awake. She left the lantern burning low and sat by the window, watching the mist curl over the field. At precisely 12, she heard it. The creak of the porch step. Her pulse quickened. She rose slowly, her hand gripping the edge of the curtain. Through the fog, she could see nothing. Just the outline of the railing, the soft glow of moonlight on wet boards. And then, a shadow moved. Someone, or something, was standing near the door. She could feel it, though her eyes couldn't catch it. A cold breath passed through the room. The lantern flickered violently, then went out. Her voice trembled. Who's there? Silence. Only the distant howl of wind across the fields. When dawn broke, she found the boots again. This time, the mud was dry, dusted with what looked like ash instead of soil. And tucked inside the left boot was a folded piece of paper. She hesitated before unfolding it. The paper was thin, yellowed, as if it had been waiting for decades. Inside, in faded ink, were only 3 words. I remember you. The words sent a chill through her bones. Who remembered her? She had no living relatives except an aunt in Boston. No one had been near her house for weeks. And yet, something deep inside her stirred, a strange familiarity, like an echo from a life she couldn't recall. She sat by the window, turning the note over and over. The sun rose pale and uncertain through the fog. That's when she saw it, just beyond the edge of her field. A figure, standing still among the wheat. Tall, motionless, watching her house. And when the wind shifted, she could have sworn she heard a whisper, a man's voice, carried faintly across the distance. Eliza. That night, she didn't sleep. She pulled her father's old rifle from the closet, though she wasn't sure she'd use it. Every creak of the house sounded alive. Every shadow seemed to move. She found herself staring at the boots again, now lined neatly by the door, though she hadn't moved them there. And for the first time, she noticed something new. Inside the right boot, pressed faintly into the leather, was a set of initials. J.W. Her father's name had been James Warren. But these boots weren't his. They belonged to someone else. Someone who knew her name. Someone who remembered her. Eliza stood by the fire until the flame burned low. Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the moonlight whole. Somewhere beyond the darkened fields, a story was waiting to be uncovered, a story that began long before she was born. And whether she was ready or not, that story was coming home. Morning came gray and thin, the kind of light that feels half asleep. Eliza hadn't closed her eyes all night. She'd sat by the window until the mist burned away and the fields turned gold again, her gaze fixed on the place where she had seen the shadow. But when she finally stepped outside, there was nothing. No figure, no footprints, only the boots, still by her door, as if waiting patiently for her to decide what to do next. She crouched, running her fingers over the initials again, J.W. The leather was cracked, the stitching worn. They looked old, older than her father's boots, older than anything that should have survived this long. But what unsettled her most was the paper from the night before. Those 3 words haunted her like a song she couldn't forget. I remember you. The town of Willow Creek was small. One dusty road, a handful of shops, and gossip that spread faster than the wind. When Eliza rode in that morning, people noticed. They always noticed when someone like her came alone. At the general store, Mrs. Halpern looked up from her counter. "Mornin', Eliza. You look pale, dear. Everything all right out at the farm?" Eliza hesitated. "Has anyone been out near my property lately? Any travelers passing through?" Mrs. Halpern frowned. "Not that I've heard. Sheriff caught a drifter by the railway last week, but he's gone." "Why do you ask?" Eliza didn't answer right away. She pulled one of the boots from her satchel and placed it on the counter. Mrs. Halpern's eyes widened. "Mercy, where did you find this?" "Outside my door. Every night." The woman leaned closer, touching the worn leather. Her fingers traced the initials, J.W., and for a moment, her face went pale. "Something wrong?" Eliza asked. Mrs. Halpern swallowed. "These belong to a soldier. I'd swear it. I remember boots like this when I was a girl, before the war ended. That mark there, it's Union issue." Eliza's heart skipped. Union. Then there. From the war, yes. Maybe 70 years old, maybe more. "Where on earth did you say you found them again?" Eliza didn't answer. The shopkeeper's words echoed in her mind. 70 years old. It didn't make sense. That night, the wind came from the north, cold and sharp, rattling the windows. Eliza had placed the boots by the fire again, but she couldn't stop thinking about what Mrs. Halpern said. A soldier's boots. Old as the Civil War. Initials J.W. She went to the old family trunk in her father's study. He'd kept everything in there, documents, letters, yellowed photographs, and journals bound with string. For years, she had avoided it. Too many memories, too much dust of the dead. But now, her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, beneath folded linens and rusted tools, she found a small box tied with a faded ribbon. On the lid, written in her father's handwriting, were the words, "For Eliza, when the time is right." Her breath caught. She untied the ribbon and opened the box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, each carefully sealed. The oldest dated back to 1864. And one, near the top, bore the same initials she had seen on the boots, J.W. She unfolded the fragile paper with care. The ink had bled in places, the writing almost lost to time. Greater than, "Dearest Margaret, if this letter ever finds you, know that I have not forgotten. The war keeps me far, but my heart remains in Willow Creek. I dream of the child you will bring into this world, our child. Tell her I will find my way home, no matter how long it takes. James Whitlock." Eliza froze. Margaret. That was her grandmother's name. Her pulse raced. Her grandmother's maiden name had been Margaret Warren, before she married Henry Warren, her grandfather. But this letter, James Whitlock, not Warren, and yet, the initials matched. J.W. The boots, the note, the same name. A truth she had never been told began to unfold like the petals of a flower long buried in snow. She sat there, staring at the letter for what felt like hours. Her grandmother had never spoken much about her life before marriage. She had died when Eliza was only 6. But Eliza remembered the way she sometimes looked out the window at dusk, as though waiting for someone who never came. Could it be that the man who left those boots wasn't just anyone? Could it be the man who had loved her grandmother before she was even born? And if so, what did he mean by, "I remember you"? Eliza pressed her hand against her chest. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air colder. She looked toward the fireplace, where the boots sat quietly by the flames. The shadows flickered across the walls like moving figures. And just for an instant, only an instant, she thought she saw a man standing in the corner. Tall, in uniform, his face hidden beneath the brim of an old cavalry hat. She blinked, and he was gone. That night, she couldn't resist. She climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, carrying the lantern in one hand and the letter in the other. The attic had always frightened her as a child, the smell of dust and time, the sound of shifting boards in the wind. But something inside her urged her forward. She searched through boxes, old furniture, and trunks filled with forgotten things. And then she found it, a photograph, tucked inside a cracked frame. It showed a young woman standing beside a man in uniform. The woman's eyes, soft and wide, were unmistakable. It was her grandmother, Margaret. But the man, tall, strong, his smile faint but proud, was someone Eliza had never seen before. On the back of the photograph, in faded handwriting, were the words, James Whitlock and Margaret, Willow Creek, 1864. Eliza's hands shook. The man from the letter was real. Her grandmother had loved him, before she ever married Henry Warren. So why had the family hidden it? And why were his boots appearing now, after all these years? She turned as the floorboards behind her creaked. Her heart leapt. Who's there? She whispered. The lantern flame quivered. In the far corner of the attic, shadows moved again, soft, shifting, almost like breath. And then she heard it. A voice. Gentle, familiar, low as a whisper carried by time itself. Greater than, you have her eyes. Eliza froze. The air grew colder, her breath visible in the flickering light. She turned slowly toward the sound, but saw only emptiness. Only the photograph in her trembling hand. When she finally descended the attic stairs, the letter clutched tightly against her chest. She knew one thing for certain. Whoever, whatever, was visiting her. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone bound to her family. Someone who had loved once, lost once, and was still waiting to come home. And as she reached the bottom step, the house seemed to sigh around her, the kind of sigh that comes from a place that remembers too much. Outside, the wind began to rise again. And when she opened the front door to look out into the night, the boots were gone, but in their place, pressed gently into the dirt, were two faint footprints, leading away into the fog. For the first time in weeks, Eliza awoke to sunlight. Golden and soft, it poured through the lace curtains, painting her walls with the quiet warmth of morning. The boots were gone, only the feather remained, delicate and white as frost, resting where she had left them. For a long while, she simply stared at it. Was it a sign, a goodbye, or a promise? Whatever it was, she felt an ache in her chest, the kind that comes not from fear, but from understanding something too large, too ancient, to fit inside a single lifetime. The day passed quietly. Eliza fed the hens, watered the garden, fixed a loose shutter on the porch, simple things, grounding things. But everything felt different now. Every sound, every shadow seemed charged with meaning. She kept thinking of James Whitlock's voice by the river. Tell her, I came home. Who was he asking her to tell? Her grandmother was long gone. Her father too. There was no one left, except her. And yet, somehow she felt that the message wasn't meant only for the dead. It was meant for her as well. As twilight fell, she packed a small lantern, her notebook, and the letters she had found in the attic. Then she walked back to the river. The path was lined with willows, their long branches swaying gently, whispering secrets in the wind. The air smelled of rain, though no clouds gathered above. She reached the same spot where she had seen him before. The water shimmered in the dying light, calm and deep, as though it too was waiting. Eliza knelt by the edge and opened the notebook. She began to write. Greater than, James Whitlock, Union soldier. Missing in action, 1865. Returned home not in body, but in spirit. His love endured beyond time. His boots carried his memory. His promise found its way to me. The ink bled slightly on the page, like tears. She tore the paper carefully from the notebook and placed it into one of the boots she had brought with her. Your story shouldn't be forgotten, she whispered. You deserve to rest. Then, with trembling hands, she set the boot adrift in the water. It floated gently at first, caught by the current, and then slowly began to sink, carried down into the dark, until it vanished completely. When she looked up again, the fog had begun to rise. Thicker this time, rolling low and silver over the water's surface, wrapping the trees in silence. And then she saw him. James Whitlock, standing once more on the opposite bank, clear as daylight now. No longer a shadow, but a man made whole. His uniform was clean, the brass buttons gleaming faintly in the dim light. The same gentle eyes, the same steady posture. Only this time, his expression held peace. Eliza stood, the lantern trembling in her hand. You came back, she whispered. He nodded once. You brought me home. The wind stirred between them, carrying the scent of cedar and old rain. Greater than, for so long, he said softly, I walked these fields searching for her. For Margaret. But she was gone before I could return. And yet, he stepped closer, the river rippling faintly beneath his feet. Greater than, when I saw you, Eliza, I thought for a moment that time had shown mercy. That somehow, she had come back to me. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm her granddaughter. A faint smile touched his lips. I know. He reached out a hand, not quite touching her, but close enough that she could feel the air shift. Greater than, blood remembers. Love remembers. It finds its way home, even through generations. Eliza swallowed hard. Why now, after all these years? The soldier looked past her, toward the rising sun beyond the trees. Greater than, because you were ready to listen. And because the river still held my name. He turned back to her, his gaze soft. Greater than, tell the world I was not lost to war. I came home, to love. That's all I ever wanted. His words lingered in the air, heavy with both sorrow and grace. Eliza nodded through her tears. I promise. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, two souls bound by memory and blood, standing between life and afterlife. And then the light began to change. The fog around him shimmered, turning to gold. Greater than, goodbye, Eliza, he said, his voice warm and certain. And thank you. He began to fade, his figure dissolving like smoke in sunlight. Greater than, James, she called, but only his last words remained, carried softly by the wind. Greater than, love never dies. It just finds another door. The river went still again. The mist lifted, revealing only the soft current and the fading glow of the lantern. Eliza fell to her knees, sobbing, not from fear this time, but from the unbearable beauty of what she had witnessed. She pressed her hands to the damp earth and whispered, he's home. He's finally home. The willows rustled gently in reply, as if in agreement. Days passed. The boots never returned, but every morning, when the sun rose, she found the same white feather on her porch, one after another, each perfectly clean, each glimmering faintly in the light. Neighbors began to notice the change in her. They said she looked peaceful now, as if a great weight had been lifted. They didn't know about the boots, or the letters, or the soldier who had once loved a woman long dead. But Eliza knew, and that was enough. One evening, she returned to the river with a bouquet of wildflowers, daisies, lavender, and white lilies. She placed them gently into the water and watched them float away. The current carried them downstream, toward the place where James Whitlock's spirit had vanished. She smiled softly. Rest easy now, she whispered. The story's safe with me. As the last light of day touched the horizon, the wind carried a single whisper through the willows, faint, distant, but unmistakable. Greater than, thank you, Eliza. She closed her eyes and smiled through her tears. The river rippled gently, the sunlight breaking across its surface like scattered gold. And for the first time in her life, the world felt whole again. The night was still, heavy with mist and silence. Only the faint hum of the wind through the trees disturbed the calm. Emma stood on her porch again, looking down at the boots, the same muddy, time-worn pair that had haunted her for months. But this time, something was different. They weren't wet, they weren't fresh, they looked clean, almost glowing faintly in the silver moonlight. She picked them up carefully. No mud clung to her fingers, no smell of earth or rain. Instead, they felt warm, as though someone had just been wearing them. Her heart pounded in her chest. She looked out toward the woods. A figure was standing there. Not far, just at the edge of the trees, where shadow and moonlight met. It was him, the man from her dreams, the man from the photograph, the man whose name had once been whispered by her grandmother in moments of sorrow and guilt. John, Emma breathed. He stepped forward, the leaves crunching softly under invisible feet. His face was calm, his eyes, a familiar green, filled with both longing and peace. You found me, he said softly. His voice was a whisper carried by the wind. Emma took a trembling step forward. Who are you really? I was the man your grandmother loved, he said, his eyes lowering. She was promised to another. I went to war, hoping to come back for her. But fate had other plans. I never returned, not in body. Only in promise. Emma's breath caught. So, the boots. I left them once, long ago, at her door, before I left for the war. I said, if I come back, I'll put them on again. But I never did. My spirit couldn't rest. I kept coming back, waiting for someone who could finally hear me, someone who carried her heart. Emma's tears blurred her vision. She looked down at the boots, still warm in her hands. You were never haunting me, she whispered. You were trying to go home. John smiled faintly. And now, because of you, I can. Behind him, the air shimmered, a soft golden light spreading through the trees, like morning breaking after an endless night. She saw another figure emerge from the light, an older woman, gentle and radiant, with kind eyes Emma had only seen in old photographs. Her grandmother. The two spirits looked at each other, and then at Emma. Thank you, her grandmother's voice whispered, though her lips never moved. You set him free. The two figures reached for each other, their hands meeting as the light engulfed them. For a moment, the world was nothing but brightness and silence. Then, just as suddenly, it was gone. The forest was dark again. The wind was soft again. The boots were gone. Emma stood there for a long time, the night air cool against her face. No fear, no mystery left, only peace. Days later, when she went to visit the old church cemetery by the woods, she found something new. A single grave had been restored, one that had been neglected for decades. Fresh flowers rested on it, and carved beneath the name John Harper were new words. Greater than, he kept his promise. He came home. Emma smiled through tears. She whispered a quiet goodbye, feeling the weight of generations lift from her heart. That night, back at her home, the porch was empty. No boots, no footprints, but as she turned to go inside, she noticed something else, a faint trace of muddy footprints leading away from her door, down the path, toward the sunrise. And she knew. He was finally walking home.